Hello, I hope everyone's coping in these strange times and staying safe. My name is Isabelle Woodward, or Izzy. I'm an illustrator living and trying to work in the southwest of the UK. I got really lucky and I had the chance to illustrate this fantastic story by Freya Charlotte, link in description to their Instagram, who is a writer I collaborated with on a failed book project at university. In this video, I'm going to chat about the failed project and how it led to this one, what you have to do in illustrating a children's book, and what I learnt from everything. This is my first published book and I had to do tons of research and muddle my way through it. I'd love to be able to help someone else and save them some time and stress. On the screen is a time-lapse of the video cover being drawn in Procreate on the iPad and Adobe Photoshop on a Mac, and some sneaky peeks of past work and process images from the book. This illustration features the characters of the book reading their own book to celebrate its publication, which should be out by the time this video is released. Links will be in the description. So I'll start with a bit of info about me and the project I worked on with Freya. I graduated from Plymouth University with a degree in illustration about 5 years ago. The project was in collaboration with a local sports club, I think also a local ferry company, the uni, and students from illustration, writing and graphics design. I had the pleasure of 2 writers, one of which was Freya, and we were all very enthusiastic and did lots of research and came up with the story really quickly. If I recall correctly, each group had to do something with the mascot of the sports club, and our group also got themed with including a ferry journey. I think another team got a swimming pool or the beach. What should have been a warning sign is that one of my tutors went to the project briefing and had to organise everything and negotiate for more time as the expectations were unachievable from the start. Another bad idea was that I didn't make the project one of my modules for the year, which I actually could have done, and instead did it on top of all the other projects, which was a terrible idea. My first tips for this video: children's books are extremely time-consuming and long-winded. Unless you're super experienced in making them or your own art process, you will need more time than you think. I will go into more detail on this later on. Second tip: if there is a client or commissioner, make sure they understand the children's book creation process and have reasonable expectations for what art you're capable of making and the time it will take you. Especially if you are making a book on top of doing other work, you will need far longer. I illustrated the story using coloured pencils and alcohol markers. I liked the design for the fox and some of the pages, but overall they lacked backgrounds and tonal differences and were generally quite pale, light and too sketchy. Our graphics design person went AWOL for most of the project and did the bare minimum, and the client didn't check in with us that often and I don't think liked my artwork, and although we finished the book, they didn't pursue it any further. I parted ways with the writers on good terms despite the failure, as we all got on well and liked each other's stuff. We had all already added each other on Facebook for communicating on the project, and Freya followed me on Instagram as well and kept up with my progress. A few years down the line, Freya decided to take one of her book ideas and write it and contacted a publisher to see if they would be interested. Book publishers have different procedures and ways they work with creators, and this one works with the main creator-author, and the author would organise and work with any artists needed. Freya then very kindly thought of me and contacted me to see if I wanted to do it in early May. I was extremely happy to do so, especially when she explained the premise of witches, magic, and flip-flops. The publisher wanted a portfolio from the artist to check to make sure I'd be able to deliver a certain standard of work. This is quite typical for most publishers. I created a PDF of some of my recent work, but was quite worried because I didn't have much work that was children's book related. So I decided to design the character of Freya's book and draw a scene from the book to show my capability. I wouldn't recommend doing this usually unless the client is willing to pay you to do the sample artwork, or you are both the author and illustrator of the book, as some publishing houses want creators to have already created a few pages when applying. However, this was more the case of my portfolio being lacking, and I wanted to make sure they wouldn't refuse. I thankfully got approved for the project and could begin creating the book. They sent Freya and I artwork requirements with sizes, bleed area and colour specifications and the contracts. I had already started early stages of the book making before the contracts were sorted at the start of June, which I would also advise not doing, but I was confident Freya would get the book made even if we had to go elsewhere. We both did research into fees and terms and had a lot of helpful communication before agreeing to anything. Freya had a contract from the publisher and with me to negotiate fees, ownerships, and what I would deliver artwork-wise and when. I was hoping to get the book out before Halloween, so had mid-July as my goal, but Freya was very flexible with the time. The first things with a children's book, if creating for someone else, is the page breakdown and character designs. I took the script from Freya and there were rhyming phrases and she wanted them in stanzas on pages, and the book to start on the right-hand side. So I used a free online design software called Canva to create the book template and put all the text onto the specific pages and give me an idea of the layout. Bleed is creating an extra bit of image so when the printed book or pages are trimmed by machines, there won't be any chance of white gaps on an image that's meant to cover the entire page. You also have to keep in mind not having text where the middle crease of the book is, or where it could get cut off. I had already designed and had Freya pick which style of character for our protagonist, which helped me to design the other characters, the grandma and the cat. I also started thinking about what colours I would use in the book to fit the witchy vibe and complement the character's gingham dress and red hair. With all this in mind, I could begin drawing the pages. I start with very loose, tiny sketches called thumbnails, which are almost stickmen-like to figure out composition. Freya's text was very action-packed, with the girl doing multiple things per page sometimes, so I had to figure out how to show this on pages or pick the key moment to show on the page. This part is more about thinking than drawing, if that makes sense. I would do multiple thumbnails of the same page to find the best way to tell the story and make it interesting. This sometimes is the point where you would make the images more readable and send to the editor for suggestions, but my thumbnails at this point were just scribbles and Freya gave me a lot of creative freedom. So I carried on working and drew full black and white digital drawings of the pages. I added full tone, which is a bit of a time waster and I wouldn't recommend, but I felt it would give Freya a better idea of the final outcome as she wouldn't be as used to seeing drafts and imagining the final compared to a seasoned book editor. During creating the black and white first dummy book, I discovered how difficult it is to draw stairs and houses. There are also imagined scenarios in the book, and I tried to figure out a different art style I could put in to make those parts more obvious. So I gathered different references and practiced drawing things like cottages for the book. I went from 10 different house designs to 2, which Freya then picked from, and I sort of merged together. For the imagined sequences, I was inspired by one of my favourite artists/animators, Lotte Reiniger, who fled Germany to live in the UK and created the first animated feature films based on fairy tales, and used paper cuts or Scherenschnitt. Her work has inspired various artists and has been paid tribute to in works such as the anime Utena and cartoon series Steven Universe. You can find some of her stuff on YouTube and I highly recommend checking it out and learning about her. When I was done, I sent a PDF copy for Freya to check. She made requests and suggestions that were really helpful in making the book make more sense and be less cluttered. Second pair of eyes is always helpful. We had a little back and forth in getting things just right, and this stage is the most important to get right before final artwork begins. Communication on book projects is hugely important as changes will always have to be made, so it's better to sort things out as fast as possible, and sometimes the editor or whoever is in charge will take a long time responding, and you could be waiting on replies. Thankfully, Freya was very prompt, so I never had this problem. Then the most exciting part begins, the final artwork. I drew all the dummy sketches to final in Procreate, and then added lighting effects and tidied things up and made some colour adjustments in Photoshop. I created a problem for myself by the end of the project as I made my files humongous and slowed down my iPad and Photoshop considerably and even struggled with exporting the images to the publishers. A lot of my artwork has patterns or details such as scales and dragons, leaves, and in this case the main character's swirly hair, gingham dress and insanely detailed hand-drawn wood textures that I thought would be a great idea but would end up filling in till 4 a.m. in the morning. If you've ever watched cartoons such as The Simpsons or other shows, you may have noticed the characters' clothing tends to be repetitive and quite simple. That's because if they appear a lot, it becomes very time-consuming keeping them consistent looking if they have lots of details. I ended up grouping drawing tasks for the pages together. For example, I would do everything but the hair details till near the end, and then draw 8 pages of hair detail in a row, or do the base colours or backgrounds for similar pages. Reusing textures or hand-drawn things where you can is a real time saver, so if I had drawn a huge section of wood detail, I could have duplicated it and altered it slightly to use on other sections or pages. I also created a wallpaper pattern that helped me make some pages more interesting and give more detail and witchy vibes to the book very quickly. The story plays on having similar actions with variations to them. In this case, the girl goes up and down the stairs, but for different reasons and different feelings each time. But I had to make sure the link was there, but the drawings weren't too repetitive. As the setting is magical, I made the staircases different each time, as if the little house is much bigger or changing on the inside. I used magical features to add interest and help with composition in parts where possible. I managed to finish the book and send it to the publishers right around the end of July. I also included fonts I had tested with my images and a final dummy book. I created the book again in Canva using the final artwork, the font and text layouts to help the editors place the text. I also had some fun creating some end paper patterns to use on the inside covers, which hopefully got used in the final book. At this point, I was done with the project and could only wait. Unfortunately, due to COVID, the publishing got pushed back to this year and January the 28th. What I learned and what I'll do in the future. There was quite a lot of stress and late nights due to my own imposed short deadline. In the future, I would set myself more time than I did for this project, as the usual amount tends to be between 4 and 6 months. If writing and drawing your own book, this could take even longer with perfecting a story, drawing some pages, getting a publisher or making publishing arrangements yourself, and then doing the artwork and editing. Another tip is to be 100% certain on artwork and printing specs. I made my files way too big and they caused all sorts of problems. I also didn't realise the publishers would add the text themselves to my artwork and had the idea to use partly hand-drawn text for a portion of making the book, which could have saved me at least 3 to 4 days of work, but I made a nice title because of it. I spent a lot of time practicing drawing stairs, buildings, the garden, her bedroom. If I had drawn some of these things in the past, it would have been easier, like an inbuilt library to draw experience from. Another tip is, what are you telling and what are you showing? I had some problems initially trying to figure out what parts to show when there was so much textual information and different actions per page. I initially had pages with almost multiple comic panels to show what was going on. On simpler pages, you can have little sequences, but generally each page is to show a snapshot, and you want the picture to tell more than what the text says. At the end of the book, on the end page, I drew an extra illustration that followed up what happened in the story, which Freya really liked and helped tie things together. Details. Having some details are fine, but ask yourself what it adds to the book. Is it necessary? Is there a simpler way to do it, or what time would you need to do it? I could have created some pages of hair and wood textures that I could have taken samples from and placed into images, much like what I did with the wallpaper pattern. Communicate. This keeps problems away or makes them easier to fix. If you are transparent about your progress and needs, people are much more likely to help you and give you more time if needed. You become much more trustworthy. My final tip is to be kind to yourself. You're trying to make an incredible thing. You're telling a story that could stick with people their whole lives or they grow up with. You're expressing yourself or a writer's ideas and feelings. For many artists, creating a book is a dream goal and way of leaving a mark in the world. Enjoy the process and what you will discover. Having a physical object of your work is an awesome feeling. Don't beat yourself up if things don't go quite to plan, as creating a book is a massive undertaking. There will always be issues. Thank you for watching. Please let me know what you think or if you have any questions. I've also put some resources and links in the description box. I hope to make more videos in the future as I continue my art journey.